Check it out. Yo, 1, 2. Check it out. Escapism.
Hi, once again it's Ben here from Beneficial Massive, where you, the masses, hopefully benefit from my reviews of video games, accessories and movies. Oh, and happy Halloween to everyone for the other day. Today's review is a doozy of a classic of an awesome chainsaw, blood-splattering, banned in some states upon release to VHS in the 80s, massacre of a flick. It's none other than the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I'm not talking about the remake, although the remake did do the original justice and I did enjoy it, but this review is the OG original version released in 1974, not far from when I popped into this world. Grew up, and then I think I was around 10 or maybe older, but I remember when we were kids, we did get started on a lot of horror movies and other crazy shit that I won't go into at this point. But yeah, my family lived next door to another family around our age, so we grew up together. I remember horror movies were definitely, I'd say, our favourite genre of films. Of course we liked other stuff too, but horror movies were a big part of our childhood, as it probably was heaps of other people's. And what an awesome age to be alive at, because if you look back at the 80s and 90s, that's when so many good horror movies were out or getting released. You had your OG classic horror characters such as Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, my favourite, Chucky, Pinhead, etc. And then the B-grade ones like the Leprechaun, the Scarecrow, yeah, a lot of those B-grade ones. But then the OG classics, the big shots of horror at the time I was getting into, came along, a character that was probably, I'd say, close to, if not, the scariest out of all of them. And this big meat axe, chainsaw wielding, the one and only Leatherface. Not only did he look scary, sound scary, and do extremely hardcore scary shit, Leatherface and the story of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was based on a true story, which makes it even scarier. One thing I remember when hiring the VHS from Video Easy back in the day, it had Banned in Queensland on it, which made us want to watch it even more. Apparently, upon release, it was banned in a lot of places, so I thought this review will break it up into a couple of parts. So let's talk a bit about the real story to begin with. Let's talk about the story this movie's based on. Okay, so really the rumours or so-called urban legend about an axe-wielding maniac actually surfaced when they were filming, or around the time they were filming, so there's actually a mix-up of what really happened there. So, those unsubstantiated rumours, mixed with the fact that the main character's Leatherface was based on the real-life murderer Ed Gein. I'll leave a link in the description to a doco on Ed Gein if you've never heard of him. Basically, Ed Gein was a serial killer who had mum issues, who had a fascination with human skin, and even more so than Leatherface, I reckon. Plus, also, when they first released it in 1974, they used the misleading info with it that it was in fact a true story, which attracted a more broad audience than just horror fans. So now let's talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The film was made in 1974, and it definitely looks it if you watch it today. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre stars Marilyn Burns, who was in the television miniseries Helter Skelter, which was about Charles Manson and his family. Paul A. Patane, who did a cameo in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre The Next Generation. Edwin Neal, who interestingly played Dr. Robotnik in the Sonic the Hedgehog movie and done voices for Batman DC Universe online game. Jim Sido, who was also the cook in Part 2 of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and this one as well. And Gunnar Hansen, who plays 5 of the movie's characters, including Leatherface. What a legend. He, prior to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, declined a role of the original Hills Have Eyes movie, and he then later wrote a book. This classic horror was directed by Tobe Hooper and written and co-produced by Hooper and Kim Henkel. Hooper was also responsible for making Poltergeist 2, which is another great horror classic, but probably not as raw as this one. Kim Henkel also co-wrote some of the script for 1994's Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, which was the fourth installment in the series. The movie's plot is pretty simple. A group of three friends go on a trip to check on their relative's gravesite as they've heard it was being vandalized. After that, they decide to visit a homestead. They pick up a creepy hitchhiker on the way who talks about his family's slaughterhouse and then cuts one of the travelers. They end up deciding to look for a swimming hole, but then they are terrorized by Leatherface and his insane family of cannibals. Yay. I won't explain in too much detail to spoil the movie for anyone that hasn't seen it, but there's killing, and when the travelers' numbers are decreased, the last survivor is exposed to the family, where to this day that scene at the dinner table still gives me chills. It's not that it's hugely disgusting, although it is, but it's more the taunting of the last survivor that goes on. She tries to escape a couple of times, and if she survives or not, I'm not going to say. As you may already know, I hate spoilers. You're going to have to check it out for yourself if you haven't already. The movie was originally rated X, but then they cut scenes and it was given a PG rating. But then a distributor restored the cut scenes in San Francisco, and apparently cinema goers walked out in disgust. And in 1976 in Canada, the police got involved and stopped the movie from being aired, otherwise the cinema would face morality charges. In Britain, it was aired for a year, but then was banned after following classification issues. It eventually was given a rating of 18 plus and was broadcast. In Australia, there were similar problems. They refused to classify the original 83-minute version in June 1975. Then they tried again with another 83-minute version in 1981, which was submitted by Greater Union, but registration was still refused. Then finally, in 1984, it was finally approved for an R rating by Filmways Australia. Yay, go Filmways Australia. It was banned in many other countries, including Brazil, Chile, Finland, France, Iceland, Ireland, Norway, Singapore, Sweden, and West Germany. In 1990, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was included into the Horror Hall of Fame in a total film poll, which had George A. Romero, John Carpenter, and Wes Craven on the panel. It was selected as the greatest horror film of all time. Empire ranked it as 46 in 50 best independent films of all time. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre has also been described as the ultimate pro-vegetarian film due to its animal rights themes. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was selected for the 1975 Cannes Film Festival Directors Fortnight and London Film Festival. In 1976, it won the Special Jury Prize at the Aveyres Fantastic Film Festival in France. Entertainment Weekly ranked the film 6th on its 2003 list of top 50 cult films. There have been 7 Texas Chainsaw Massacre films since this original release. These include sequels, prequels, and remakes, which in my opinion all did the original justice. Kind of. There's so many remakes these days, like we live in an era of remakes over the last 10 or so years, I'd say. Lots of remakes. Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Rob Zombie's Halloween remake, which I thought was great. It showed a lot more insight into Michael Myers' character. The new Nightmare on Elm Street, I didn't particularly like. He didn't look right, and the killings were not too creative like the originals. But the Texas Chainsaw Massacre newer ones were good. I still like the old B-grade looking raw original version, which is in this case with a lot of things, not just movies. But anyway, if you haven't seen the 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, then I'd recommend it. It's great for Halloween or a scare with your girlfriend, but if you're sensitive and don't like horror movies, then definitely run. Run away, run faster, cause that human skin, mask wearing, chainsaw wielding, maniac loves a good chase and kill. Hope everyone had a great Halloween on Tuesday and hope you enjoyed today's episode of Beneficial Massive. If you have any questions or anything to say, please put it in the comments section and please hit subscribe and like as usual. Be good people. Peace or rest in pieces. Haha.
Check it out. 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 Check it out.